Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview inspiring, fascinating women who are navigating aging with class and sass. I'm your host, Nicole Christina. Hey everyone, I am so grateful for all of the downloads, and I'd love a rating on iTunes and a comment. And please subscribe. It helps the show's rating so other people can find it and learn how to age well. And if you are loving the podcast, why not check out the companion online course, Zestful Aging, Simple and Sustainable Habits for Health and Longevity. You can access it through my website, NicoleChristina.com/Zestful Aging. It's based on the Harvard study of adult development, and I'm really proud of how it's turned out. Well, I've got my coffee in my hand and my trusty dog Sparky beside me, so let's begin. Eve Abrams is an audio documentarian, writer, and educator. She produces the audio project Unprisoned, which focuses on how mass incarceration affects people serving time outside. Unprisoned has received a Gabriel Award and New Orleans Press Club Award and was a Peabody finalist. Abrams' 2015 documentary, Along St. Claude, received the Edward R. Murrow Award and a New Orleans Press Club Award. Her radio works can be heard on a host of national programs such as Morning Edition and Reveal. Abrams is currently a Robert Rauschenberg Artist as Activist Fellow. Eve has been a teacher for over 20 years, and she currently teaches at a boys' home in New Orleans. So, could you talk about how you started getting interested in the mass incarceration that you were seeing in your adopted home state?
Well, immediately when you come to Louisiana, you're confronted by the most beautiful and the most ugly parts of our country. And that's true in New Orleans as well. In fact, it's probably more stark in New Orleans. And the fact that these two things can coexist side by side is really, I think, probably where a lot of the beauty of New Orleans comes from. But I, for many, many years, as a transplant, was simply overwhelmed with the beauty of the place. And I knew of so many people who were working in criminal justice. And that is the reason why so many people come to New Orleans, is to work on criminal justice issues. And it was always a bit overwhelming to me. It was something that I sort of put off to the side and chose not to think about. And then in 2015, an organization called Association of Independents in Radio, AIR, they put out a call to independent producers, which is what I am, an independent radio producer, to do projects about the overlooked pockets of our country, the people whose voices we don't hear from, the communities that we don't see. And it was sort of instantaneous. I knew, wow, I want to talk about the families and the neighborhoods and all the other folks who are implicated by mass incarceration. It was sort of an aha moment. So I applied for funding from AIR. This was called Localore Finding America was the name of the initiative. And I got the funding. And so I sort of just plunged in. I really didn't know anything about it. I reached out to everybody I knew. And the fact of the matter is, because this problem is so pervasive in New Orleans, because we are the largest incarcerator per capita of any place on the planet, it was not a challenge to find people who are impacted by it. So I really, in my first season working on Imprisoned, I just went for the lowest hanging fruit. And, I learned a tremendous amount, and there is so much more I have to learn.
I'm wondering, I've listened to many of your episodes, and they are so powerful, and they're compelling. They're so beautiful, and
Oh, thank you.
you come at it with such a tenderness, I think, and also just this deep curiosity. How has learning about your is it okay to say, is it your subjects as a documentary person, is
Oh,
that, or
the people I've
people
met.
you, yes, the people you've met, how has that sort of changed your personal outlook?
Well, I think this entire project has been this ongoing, rolling revelation of my white privilege. And I don't anticipate that ending anytime soon because white privilege, like any kind of privilege, is something that is invisible. That's how it functions. You don't realize you have it. It is not said, it is simply there. And I, I, I can't really even say I completely see it now, but I see it a lot more than I did before. And it's constantly unfolding to me that the norms I take for how life should be lived and what society is like and how the power structures of society work, heretofore I had felt that they were here for citizens, they were here for the people. And in understanding and becoming intimate and proximate with other people who have different realities, it is so clear to me that our society is built upon white supremacy, and I have benefited from that. And my reality is not the reality of so many of my fellow citizens. And it enrages me on a regular basis. And hopefully it helps me appreciate that which I have. And it also strengthens my resolve to use my privilege for a purpose. And that purpose is to change the way that things are. We should live up to the ideals that we profess to. And we don't. We don't. And that, there's one wonderful man, Calvin Duncan,
I remember the judge that you
Oh
worked with.
no,
Oh,
that's Calvin Johnson. He's also
okay.
incredible. He's incredible.
Yeah.
Calvin Duncan is becoming a lawyer. He's a brilliant, wonderful man who was wrongfully incarcerated for decades at Angola Penitentiary. He's in several of the episodes, and I think it's episode number 6, the one about the synagogue. He's in that one quite prominently, and he says in that episode, it's a privilege if you've never been thrown into the back of a police car. And to those who have been given much, much is expected. And I think about his words all the time. I think that's quite true. This is something I owe my fellow citizens and my country. I'm a big believer in the possibility of America, and it's quite startling to see the reality of it. And I feel like my work is just holding a microscope and a microphone up to that other reality and really becoming a megaphone for these other voices. And that's how I see, that's the best use of my voice. That's the best use I can make of my voice, is to help amplify the voices of other people that are excluded either overtly or de facto from a larger societal conversation.
Yeah, I'm curious about how it is for you to be, a white New Yorker. And I did pick up the accent.
I'm not a New Yorker, actually.
Okay.
I'm not from New York. I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is right outside of Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And I moved to New York after college.
Gotcha. Okay. So you have a sort of a northeast,
Correct.
Sound,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And do you feel as though people who you meet really accept and trust your aims here, and they're willing to speak with you vulnerably and honestly, given the fact that there's such a power differential?
I find when you are recording other people and asking them to be themselves and to share of themselves, that the most powerful tool you have at your disposal is to do likewise and to be yourself and to show your humanity. There have been a couple interviews in my 12 years as a radio producer that didn't work out so well, but really I could count them on one hand. And the vast majority, I've never had a problem. It also does not hurt that New Orleanians are just some of the most beautiful, open, wonderful people you will ever meet in your life. It's just part of the culture. And it hasn't been a challenge for me. It really hasn't.
Mm-hmm. I can hear the love when you talk about the beauty. And, I remember the episode you did on costuming, on how you interviewed some people who had their Tupperware crates of costumes, and that was the only place they felt comfortable to do their costumes, wear their costumes proudly. And I can hear, as you talk about it, just the love you feel for this place.
Well, it's an incredible place. There's nowhere else like it. It has incredible problems. I mean, it's the most beautiful and the most horrific place, and that creates quite a dynamicism. Is that a word? It's a it's a really incredible place, and I feel so privileged to have found it, and I just hope I get to live here as long as I can. Unfortunately, I don't think New Orleans is long for this planet, but I hope to be here for quite some time.
What do you mean when you say that? What's your primary concern about what's going to happen to it?
Oh, well, global warming, sea level rise. We are
Mm-hmm.
losing our wetlands. Our land is sinking. We're on the coast. Um, we seem intent on not curbing our energy use in our country or on this planet. And I think we are all in for a lot of changes. And New Orleans is one of the places that's on the front line of that change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a scary place. It's a scary time to be alive. Um, so, how do you keep from being overwhelmed by some of the painful aspects, because you're obviously very sensitive to social justice issues, and it sounds like there's so many you could choose, and
Mm-hmm.
you've chosen the mass incarceration. How do you personally keep your own sort of head above water and keep going when it's a lot to process?
Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes I don't. My body has taken quite a hit. I exercise pretty much every day. I go swimming every other day. I do yoga every other day. I bike everywhere. But I get a lot of body work these days, as much as I can afford, because my body really takes a hit. My neck, my shoulders, headaches. But I have a beautiful garden. I have a wonderful partner. I have cats. I have friends. I have New Orleans. I have New Orleans. I go hear music. I talk with my neighbors. It's sometimes it's easier than others. It's hard. It can be a real challenge. I don't have a magic bullet, but I am buttressed by the reality that I have it really good. I have the resources to even combat all of those things I just named, and many, many,
Mm-hmm.
many people do not. I also read quite a bit of fiction. That is a big help. For years I didn't have the time, or I felt I didn't have the time to read fiction, but ever since the most recent presidential election, I
Mm-hmm.
have prioritized reading fiction, and that has been a tremendous help.
What books are you reading?
Oh gosh, I should go and run. I can't even remember the name of the wonderful book I just started. Let me see if I can find it on my computer, because I just got it from the public library, and it's so good. It's about trees. Uh,
Oh.
yeah, it's fiction, but it's about trees, and it's by Richard somebody. Let's see if I can. Oh, here it is. Uh, it's called The Overstory by Richard Powers.
Oh, what a great name.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that has been wonderful so far. Right before that, the last novel I read is The Hate You Give, which is a young adult novel. It's fantastic. Oh my goodness,
Mm.
what a great
I
novel.
I think I've heard of that one. Do you have peers and friends in the business who are doing this kind of reporting that are sort of a support group for you?
I have a collaborator in New Orleans. Her name is Katie Reckdahl, and she is a fabulous print reporter. And I would not have been able to do this project without her. She's really, truly incredible. I have other radio folks in town. I edit another podcast called Tripod, which is a history podcast of New Orleans, which is wonderful. That's produced by Lane Kaplan Levinson. I can't recommend that enough. And then I have, many, many colleagues who also did local or Finding America projects. I have other radio colleagues. I have friends, lots of friends in New Orleans, both in the social justice world and without, and not in that world. And then my husband is a musician. I'm surrounded by musicians, which is a fabulous, fabulous inspiration to be around all this incredible artistry in my adopted hometown. So, yeah, I mean, I think also New Orleans is such a small town that it's the kind of thing where I go to the grocery store or the pool or the post office and people are constantly telling me how much they love Unprisoned, and that's really helpful. Yeah.
Hello, Zestful Agers. A short intermission to thank you for the incredible amount of downloads. I love creating this podcast, and it's so satisfying to know that you are enjoying it too. Creating and hosting Zestful Aging has been a blast, but it does require a lot of time and resources to deliver a high-quality interview to you every week. So I've signed up with Patreon, which is kind of like Kickstarter, but for ongoing artistic projects. Unlike Kickstarter, the donations are recurrent and the amount is usually smaller. When you become a patron of Zestful Aging, you will receive special benefits like behind-the-scenes info, a place to communicate with other listeners, as well as other patron-only bonuses. These funds will be used to make equipment upgrades, particularly for mobile interviewing, and to travel to interview guests, like to New York City to interview participants in the Diversity Fashion Show. I also need to hire a professional editor. So please go to patreon.com/Zestful Aging and make a small but vital donation. Thank you for contributing to the ongoing success of Zestful Aging, and I can't wait to bring you more juicy, inspiring interviews. Now back to the show. You're doing so many of the things that science is proving are really health promoting. Your community, your sense of gratitude, doing meaningful work, listening to music, which we know changes our brain for the better. You're hitting a lot of the big ones.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I didn't know whether, certainly the yoga and all that, but, this idea that you really love where you live and you're so invested, and the curiosity. I mean, those are all like gold for our development and our evolution and our sort of metamorphosis. So just to let you know, you're checking off all the boxes. Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
Do you have any thoughts about any other projects either coming out of Unprisoned or just other projects you think, wow, I would love to sink my teeth into that?
Yeah, I do. There are a couple different, I have to produce the second season of Unprisoned, and that's what I'm currently working on. But I've become really interested, so much of the way that we manifest crime and punishment is in this country is embedded in our history, our racial history. And there's a really wonderful podcast by my first radio teacher named John Bewin. I can't recommend this podcast enough. It's called Seeing White.
Okay.
And it's part of his podcast, Scene on Radio, SCENE, Scene on Radio. It's a series, I think it's 14 parts, called Seeing White. You could find it just by looking for Seeing White.
Sure.
And it really looks at what it means to be white in this country. And, through listening to this podcast and my own work, I've just come to think so much about the way that the legacy of slavery has changed, and how we've been so, I think our fear of apologizing, and not even apologizing, but just seeing clearly and owning up to, our fear of reconciling with this horrible legacy. And I just think it's that fear of apologizing, that fear of owning up to, has created so much more damage in our society. And so I'm quite interested in how slavery is taught to young people, and how it is and is not recognized in our city. In New Orleans here, we're having our 300-year anniversary of New Orleans as a city, which many people could call the 300-year anniversary of taking land from Native Americans. And, there's so much celebrating going on. And there are a couple groups in the city who are really dedicated to showing the racial and the slave history of our city, which is largely ignored. 2 plaques have just recently gone up in the city to note places where human beings were bought and sold. And, New Orleans was the hub of the domestic slave trade. And to think that there are just 2 plaques that went up within the last year that speak of this history, I just find that abhorrent. And I think so much of the controversy, for example, surrounding our monuments, et cetera, really comes from a lack of understanding and acceptance of what our history actually is. And so I'm very interested in a project that looks into really how that history is taught, and exploring how it should be taught. Something along those lines. That is very interesting to me. And then I'm also
as a teacher also.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I can see that sort of weaves in your old life with your new life.
Right. And actually I've never really given up teaching, so it's but yes, as a full-time occupation, it is my old life for sure. So I'm interested in that. And then I quite separately, actually, I've been involved recently in a land use battle in my neighborhood, which was a real David and Goliath story. And my neighbors and I incredibly won the most recent battle. I don't know if we've won the war, but we definitely have won the most recent battle. And my experience fighting developers and having to fight fight the woman who was elected to represent us in city council, who thankfully just left her office. That has really gotten me thinking about participation in government. And so that is also something that I'm really thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts about Justin Trudeau, in terms of his apology to the people who came before? Mm-hmm. And also Germany making apologies. Thoughts about that?
Well, I think you can't really move on until you acknowledge the truth. I think we've all experienced this. You get into a fight with somebody and everybody becomes entrenched in their position. And when you simply say, I'm sorry, and you mean it, it really can melt away a lot of the acrimony. And
absolutely,
there was this book that I actually haven't read it, which is a shame because I talk about it as though I've read it, but I heard the author interviewed on Fresh Air. And the book is called Tomlinson Hill. And it's about a man named something Tomlinson who was an international correspondent, a writer, and he covered the peace and reconciliation process in Rwanda. And which sounds like an incredible moment of actually, you come together, you tell your truth, you establish a truth that is universally acknowledged and includes all of the horrors. You don't hide that away. You bring it out into the open, and then you move on. And he covered this, and he realized we have not done this in our country. And he is from a place in Texas called Tomlinson Hill, and his forebears were slave owners. And he went back and he really researched his family history. And he exposed this narrative. So many people who have, whose forebears own slaves, the story that they tell themselves is, well, we were the good ones. We were the good slave owners. And he revealed that in the case of his family, and probably in the case of the vast majority of families, that is absolutely not the truth. That's a fiction that we tell ourselves. And he uncovered primary documents, letters from his great whatevers, talking, in rather mundane terms about the necessity of brutalizing their workforce. And he went on to find both he went on to find the African American descendants of the people that his family enslaved. And
wow.
Yeah, it's a really incredible, it sounds like a really incredible book. And I feel like that sort of reckoning writ large is what is required for our country to truly move on.
Did you ever see the film, it was many years ago, called The Nasty Girl?
I did not.
It's about a young woman in Germany. She's if I recall, this is probably at least 10 years ago, and she's writing a paper, and she goes and uncovers the town's history. And as you can imagine, she's not entirely popular after she does that, and to see some of the elders and what happens and how she becomes demonized after exposing some of the truths. It's a fascinating film, and it reminds me of what you're talking about.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of fear of admitting the truth because sometimes the truth is very ugly. But I don't think that lies ever really work in the end. I think you end up just causing a lot more pain, and it's just a lot easier to be truthful and honest and experience. We're so afraid of discomfort and pain, and so there's this instinct to just keep it nice. And I don't know, it's just not the tradition I come from. I'm Jewish, and everything is out in the air all the time, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you get Talmudic about it. And then, hopefully you know where you stand, and you can move on, and you're not constantly tiptoeing around something.
Is that part of what makes you so passionate about uncovering these stories of injustice, do you think, your history as a Jewish woman?
Oh, probably. I think it's just I'm I don't suffer fools lightly, and I'm not good at masking how I feel. I'm actually rather terrible at it. I'm a no bullshit kind of person. So it's just the way I've always been. I don't know, is it my particular genetic makeup? Is it the culture from which I come? I don't know.
You talked about Rwanda, and, I mentioned Justin Trudeau in Germany. Why do you think the U.S., this is a what they call a fat pitch, right? Why do you think the U.S. has been so slow in acknowledging our history and coming up with an apology?
Well, the American myth rests on a very different narrative. And I don't think we're willing to abandon that narrative.
And the narrative being,
oh, that we're somehow an exception to the rule, that we're this incredible place of,
we're special.
Yeah, we're special. We're the, exceptional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think we're so exceptional. I think we, in my opinion, our strength comes from our diversity. I'm firmly in that camp. And I think for anything to truly be strong, I think real strength comes from truth. If you're hiding behind something, if you're afraid to face something, I think that means you think you can't withstand it. And I think people who are afraid to really look at America's history truthfully, that means that they don't think America can take the truth. We can't survive reality. I would argue that those people have a lesser opinion of the capacity of our country.
That's very interesting. I hadn't quite thought of it that way. Yeah, I think about it as a rationalization somehow.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It is a rationalization. It's a lot easier to be copacetic.
Mm-hmm.
It's less work.
Do you ever need to take a break? Do you ever need to leave? I know you do a really good job with your exercise and your people and your music. All that is nurturing. Do you ever have to leave?
Heck yeah. Have you ever been in New Orleans in the summer? It's a nightmare.
I have been a lot of places, but I have never been there.
Don't come in the summer. It's so hot. It's terrible. Mm-hmm. We now have central air conditioning, but before we did, on a daily basis, I would think I was going literally insane. And then I realized, no, I'm just hot. Mm-hmm. My husband is from Ithaca, New York, which is a really beautiful place. And
that's right near us. That's right near where I'm podcasting from.
Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so we go there every summer and we take a vacation. And I just the other day I was fantasizing about going to the coast, the Florida coast for a little bit. I don't do that very much, but I do fantasize about it. Yeah, no, I most miss living down here. I most miss topography. I love walking in the woods. I love a vista, and there's no vista around here, sister. So
Got it.
Yeah. We like to go to a national park every summer. Last year we went to the Olympic Peninsula, which was just unbelievable. Yeah, no, I need to replenish. I mean, I think the greatest gift we have is this planet, and I'd like to see more of it before I go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. I love to hear from my listeners, so send me an email at NicoleChristina.com and tell me what you'd like to hear more about. I would also greatly appreciate if you could hop on iTunes and rate the show. Ratings help other people find the podcast so I can share all these good, juicy interviews with others. I would also invite you to become a patron of the Zestful Aging podcast. Hop on over to patreon.com/Zestful Aging and consider making a small donation. You will be eligible for insider-only goodies and behind-the-scenes information, and it'll help you feel good knowing that you're contributing to the Zestful Aging podcast. I'll look forward to sharing more juicy interviews next week on Zestful Aging.